Remember in elementary school how some kids were so excited to answer a question that they'd wave their hand back and forth in the air, just hovering ever so slightly above their seat? The Hermione Grangers of second grade? Yeah, well, that was me. So I have the real sympathy for students who become discussion dominators. Though on the outside, this appears to make them successful students and is reinforced in general by the school system, it's truly just as important for these kids to adjust their approach to group dynamics as it is for students who are completely silent in class. Both groups present a challenge for educators looking to use student-led discussion methods. Bing, 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 that's us. And today on the podcast, I'm sharing everything I've learned about helping kids on both ends of the participation spectrum, your discussion dominators and your silent students. Because, in fact, helping one is helping the other. Quieter students won't have a chance to participate until dominant students take a step back. Dominant students won't understand why it's important to step back until quieter students begin to use their voice. The first steps are the hardest on both sides of this story, but it is possible, and the results are so worth working for. This is the fourth episode of our discussion series. Maybe it's the one that you've been waiting for, because we've all been in discussions carried by 3 kids while the rest watch, turning their heads back and forth like they're at a tennis match, but not anymore. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. So let's start by talking about your discussion dominators. These are often very successful kids at school. Maybe it's your kids that are in school government and captains of sports teams, and they're on the honor roll, and they're just really used to answering every question in class, being smiled upon by the teacher. Our system really rewards this, the kids who talk all the time. It's sort of our definition of a good student. And that makes it really painful for these kids to realize that there are some aspects of this approach to education that are not actually desirable. Your observer in your discussion will almost unquestionably say everyone needs to talk as their feedback on the first day, which is the very first tiny little pressure lever on both sides of the spectrum, okay? But the dominators are likely to continue thinking that it's up to them to carry the class. They're going to hear this, everyone needs to talk, and they're going to be like, well, I talked, so that's good. I need to keep talking. I'm doing great. And the more silent students are going to feel like a pressure, like, okay, I'm doing something wrong. This is all my fault. Everyone needs to talk. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? So theoretically, it should be a lever that really affects both kids, but it's going to be felt more by the silent students at first. Now, Exeter calls these discussion dominators Harkness warriors. That's what I learned when I went to the Exeter Humanities Institute. There was a whole special workshop on Harkness warriors after lunch one day, and I went to it, even though my future husband invited me to go to the beach instead. I said I really couldn't miss the workshop on Harkness warriors, and so I went and I learned a lot of different strategies. And the funniest one, their silliest solution, was to have a bunch of hard candies in your classroom and to give one to your Harkness warrior when they were dominating a student-led discussion, and tell them they couldn't talk until they had finished it, obviously in like a friendly, funny kind of way. But that is not the solution that I usually went with. So let's sort of go back and forth. We really can't only talk about one group without talking about the other. We can't even list all the solutions for one group and then list all the solutions for the other, because it's such a push and pull. They're so closely connected. So we'll start for a second again now with quieter students. Quieter students could be quieter for so many possible reasons. Maybe they didn't have time to do their reading. Maybe they are emerging bilingual or trilingual students, and it takes them a little bit longer to process an idea that they want to say out loud in the discussion than kids who are speaking in their first language who just find it like super quick to grab the words they want. I like to brainstorm with the class a little bit about ways to get into the discussion if you're feeling a little nervous or if you're feeling like you need more time to prepare than you get in that sort of super quick back and forth. So that is also a time when you can point out to everybody that the back and forth doesn't have to be super quick. If you are in a discussion and you're just like waiting to get in there with your comment and you speak the moment that somebody else just finished, have you really like considered anything they said, or were you basically just ignoring them and waiting to say your thing the moment that they finished? So that's one thing you can kind of say in your list as you're talking about like how can you get in if it's a little bit hard for you. You can say, hey, everybody, be sure you're letting a moment of silence pass between comments so everybody can think and not just be like in line to talk. Another way for a student to get into the discussion if they're finding it a little bit difficult is to be the first person to start a discussion or the first person to start a new topic when a topic has petered out, because that person can just read their question or read the quote they found or read out loud the answer to the warm-up that we all had. This is a super great starting point for any student who's feeling kind of nervous about speaking or who just needs more time to put a thought together. Being the one to read the question when I say as the teacher, like, who wants to get us started with this student-led discussion? And then I go into taking notes mode. Maybe I look over there and Gina, who has struggled to get into the discussion, I might make like some meaningful eye contact with her before I look down to start taking notes. And Gina might be the person to read her question out loud. And boom, Gina's like, I did it. I participated in the discussion for the first time this month. And she's feeling so good about herself. And then maybe it goes back to like loud, confident students for a while. And then the discussion topic peters out and there's a pause while everyone's like, what should we talk about next? And then maybe John, who's also often a quiet student for other reasons, looks at what he wrote down in the warm-up and realizes that we haven't really talked about it yet. And he reads his thing out loud and like, bing, 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 John talked. And like the observers over there smiling their head off because John hasn't talked in 2 weeks. And like the observer gets to write a line from John's name to the next name. And they just know that the chart is going to look better because John talked and Gina talked. And like, now if only Ted will talk, and everyone's kind of now rooting for that to be possible. And maybe, just maybe, some of the louder, more confident students are like, wow, what John just said from his thoughts in the warm-up is so interesting. Like, wow, he compared that character to this experience that he had that's unlike any experiences that any of us have ever had, who are loudly dominating this discussion right now. Maybe we want to ask a follow-up question to John. And then John becomes a little bit integrated, even if there's just one back and forth, even if just one of the louder, more dominant students has a chance to register, hey, John has more going on behind his like quiet note-taking than I thought before. And those small steps that are so hard to like put in your scope and sequence are the building blocks of moving this needle on this sort of dominant silent spectrum. It's like all of these tiny things where students start to see like, wow, this discussion is enriched when more people participate. How can I help with that? And kids who are in the middle might realize that they might be able to draw somebody out in a non-confrontational way, in a nice way, or they might be able to help somebody. They might see that a quieter student was about to say something when somebody talked over them, and they might just say like, oh, Sarah, were you about to say something? Not like, Sarah, what do you think? Sarah, you haven't talked yet. You never want students to do that. But if they see somebody get shut down and they want to bring them in, that's totally different. And it's like these thoughts that start to come up in everyone's head are magical. When you start to see like little inroads from quieter students who are just reading a question out loud or whatever, or reading a quote that they wrote down the night before, but then maybe they also compare it to something, unique to their experience or unique to an art exhibit that they once saw or another book that they read or a place that they traveled to or whatever. And then it just kind of opens everyone's eyes to the possibility that they would greatly enrich the discussion. And the observer is likely to reinforce that in their report at the end of the classroom. They're likely to say something like, hey, it was really cool today. In the last discussion, the person with the most comments had 26 comments, and there were 10 people who didn't have a chance to say anything. And today, the person who made the most comments only made 14 comments, and there were only 3 people who didn't get a chance to say anything or whatever. Like, you will start to see with your help, with your support and your like conversations with observers and conversations with students, that these small steps can be made and that they make a huge difference in the way everybody sees the discussion. So let's keep going with ways that you can kind of support this, right? It's easy for me to kind of reflect back and see that students have this back and forth, but what can you literally do on the day-to-day? One thing you can do is sort of reminisce about that beanbag story that we talked about in the last episode, that special activity where everyone tells a story together. This is something you can refer back to regularly throughout the year. Talk about how much your discussion is enriched when everyone contributes their history, their knowledge, their creativity, their curiosity, their questions. Just talk about how there's no way that if you lectured about the book, you could bring up all the points that the class community could generate together based on all of their combined experience and how amazing that gift is to the community. And so just kind of having that metaphor there can be helpful in framing this conversation. Another thing that's just absolutely, I cannot overstate its importance, is just to keep using the observer in a really nuanced, thoughtful way. Guide the observer to be thoughtful and caring about this issue. Talk about different ways that the observer can chart the discussion and report back in a way that supports finding more balance without calling anyone out, without making anyone feel uncomfortable. Now, another thing that's really helpful is to have some individual conversations where you can support students who are struggling, whether it's a student who just won't stop talking all the time or a student who just really feels super nervous and just feels like Harkness or whatever your student-led method is the most difficult thing they've ever had to do, and they just like want to throw up when they come into your class, right? Both these kids need help from you. Invite a student who is really speaking a lot to just do an experiment. Just say like, maybe tomorrow, just choose like 3 of the points that you think are most important to say and just see what happens. And chances are that student is going to think that no one else will talk and that the discussion will absolutely die and be a failure because they aren't saving everybody with their comments. And that is what school has taught them. And that has been reinforced to them their whole life. And so that is going to be hard for them to hear and maybe hard for you to say. And, the whole experience may be kind of difficult if they manage to do it and then realize that other people will speak and that other people do have important things to say. That is like an incredible learning moment for that student, because you want to show them that it's not that what they're saying isn't important and that they're not a super important part of the community. They are. But that if they can find a way to balance themselves a little bit, it does make space for other people. It is an important modification to their behavior, just like you want the quieter kids to push themselves a little bit and start to participate in a way that they can live with. Both things are equally important. And I know that for me as a participant, this was difficult. This was difficult. I found group work really hard in school. I often felt like I had to carry the group, but then at the same time, I didn't really get to do what I wanted because I also had to include everyone's opinions. And so I had to like do all the work without getting to do the work that I wanted to do. And probably you may have had similar experiences, and you may have been in discussions like I was, where I had an answer that I was excited to say, and then the teacher called on like 11 people in a row who didn't say anything, and I was just sort of waiting and waving my hand. And I felt so frustrated, and I just wanted to say my thing. And so I really I could cry with kids sometimes when they experience the transformation of realizing that maybe the way they've been taught that they should carry everything all the time is maybe not the path that they want to continue on, that their thoughts are rich and deep and important, and that still they should wait sometimes and hear what somebody else has to say. It's really a push and pull, you guys. It's like it goes slow. As one group starts to make small adjustments, then the other group is affected. It never looks the same in any one class. You're gonna have some classes where there aren't a lot of dominators and there aren't a lot of really quiet kids, and it doesn't take as much work. You're gonna have some classes where you have 2 kids who say absolutely 95% of the comments and 18 kids who are mostly quiet, and you're gonna have a lot of work to do to guide them over the course of a year to find more of a middle ground, and everything in between, right? And it's really just like this incredible journey as you figure this out. Now, there are a few things, a few more little sort of random tricks or gimmicks that you can try. They're tricky, but they can produce results. One thing I've done in class is I've tried doing like offering a little prize if everyone can participate on a single day. But I let them know way in advance. I try to keep it light, not put a lot of pressure on it. I say like, no big deal. If we don't do it on Wednesday, we can try it again Friday. If we don't do it Friday, we can try it again the next week, whatever. Like, don't worry. But let's just try it. Let's just do a little challenge. And I'm going to bring you all cookies if you manage, or I'm going to give you all a bonus 5 out of 5 in the grade book or whatever. Another thing that can be fun, and this is just like a little game you can play, break up the tension before a discussion. It's called the ABC game, and I wish I could remember where I first learned it. I can't remember if it was at the Exeter Humanities Institute or at another conference or just like online from a teacher, but I learned it, 15, 20 years ago, and it's amazing. You can invite students to learn to watch each other for their visual cues that they're interested in saying something by playing a game called the ABC game. And I haven't thought about this in a while, but it's such a fabulous tool, and students tend to love it, and they learn a lot about each other while they're playing. So you say, okay, guys, we're going to try to say the alphabet A to Z. Anyone can start with A. Anyone can say B. Anyone can say C. You cannot gesture to each other. You just need to look around the room at each other. If anybody says the same letter at the same time, we have to start over. So the first kid says A, and then chances are 2 or even 3 kids will say B at the same time, and you'll have to start over. And then maybe you get to A, B, C, D, and then 2 kids say D at the same time. And it is such an interesting and funny challenge. I'm trying to recall, I think maybe like 2 times in hundreds of efforts have I seen kids get all the way to Z. It is really hard. But it asks them to slow down and really look at each other and practice their eye contact and read each other's cues to figure out when somebody's thinking, okay, I'm about to talk. And that can manifest itself into discussion by helping kids see when maybe a quieter student is about to talk, and maybe a kid who's got a comment really ready might actually notice that a quieter student has something to say, and then that kid can maybe wait a little bit while the quieter student speaks. And so that ABC game can really have ripples out into the discussion in a cool way. Okay, I think that is what I want to say. That is what I want to tell you. I bet you're wondering, like, why is this all worth it? Why does Betsy care about this so much that she's just devoting 6 episodes of the podcast to this and just sort of going on and on about this? But Harkness has played such a meaningful role in my life as an educator, but also my life personally. I feel like I learned so much about just the dynamics of department meetings and faculty meetings and family dinners and, parent-teacher association meetings and just anywhere that you're with a group of people from deeply investing in this method. And if you think about your own life, all the different places that you interact, I bet dominators, and I bet silent observers in your adult life too. And I feel like, how great would it be if we all had the chance to learn these lessons of group dynamics in school, that we would all really be wondering, like, what's going on with that quieter person? What might they have to contribute? What can we all learn from each other? What can we all come up with? Collaboration is such a huge skill in the workplace now, but it's also just like this integral part of family life and relationships and like just so many things in life. And so I feel like learning to listen, learning to present your opinion in a clear way while also valuing other people's. This is an incredible gift we can give to students that will just flow across their lives. And when I think about how partisan we've become in the US, where everyone's talking about these sort of bubbles we live in, where we just hear other people who have our same opinions, what could be more important than learning to talk to each other, right? Like learning to really listen, ask thoughtful follow-up questions, share experiences that other people may not have had that can illuminate an issue. So for me, whether you use Harkness, Socratic, or your own twist on student-led discussion, I really believe these super messy life lessons that come out of student-led discussion are worth the complicated emotions and the conversations that they require, the sort of slow, day-by-day improvement that leads to, potentially someplace pretty magical by the end of the year. Thanks so much for joining me today for the 4th episode in our discussion series. We've got 2 more coming next week, including our episode when discussion goes off the rails. So I hope you'll be back to join me then. Go ahead and hit subscribe or follow if you are a new listener, and that way the episode will drop right into your feed. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.